Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This time, we're taking a deep dive into, uh, hatching new perspectives. It's all about creativity and perception and how we can change how we think over time.
It's really interesting stuff.
Yeah, and you sent in some truly fascinating thoughts on all this.
Mm,
I feel like we're watching a drawing come to life, like, just line by line, revealing this really unique perspective.
definitely. And you know what really struck me? That whole theme you have about details and perspective.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're saying, pay attention to the small stuff and you'll unlock the big picture, like that butterfly effect, right?
Exactly. And you even said you write down small details that catch your eye, like you're planting these little seeds of ideas to see if they'll grow into something bigger later on.
I love that.
Me too. It's like
Well,
a scientist, right?
oh, yeah, totally. Like a scientist meticulously recording observations, even the tiny ones, because you never know which one leads to a breakthrough.
Or an artist noticing the way light hits something. Right?
Exactly. It's those tiny details that bring the work to life.
They add layers of understanding.
Hmm.
And speaking of layers, you mentioned patience too, especially as you get older.
Ah,
You
yeah.
said you have less patience now in areas where you've, struggled before.
Mm-hmm. Especially if I put in a lot of effort and things didn't work out. It's like I'm more careful about where I invest my energy. I've learned from experience.
So you're looking for something more meaningful, more valuable to you personally.
Exactly. It's not just about pushing through. It's about having that inner drive.
And your experience with working out, that's such a good example of this. You said it used to be a chore,
Oh, it was.
but now you actually enjoy it.
Well, sometimes, under the right circumstances, yeah. It's funny how our values and motivations can change over time. What used to feel like an obligation can become something you genuinely enjoy.
Right. And this ties into something else you said. Feeling more jaded, but also acknowledging that you get what you deserve.
Tough but true, right?
It is. And you talked about gaining experience and how that leads to having these higher desires, like reaching for the best fruit on the tree.
Yeah, it's not just about getting what you want, it's about your wants themselves evolving.
I love that. It reminds me of that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, as we meet our basic needs, we start aiming for more, for self-actualization, for creative fulfillment, for things that give our lives more purpose.
It's not just about hitting a goal, it's about growing and changing what we value along the way.
Yeah. And even if you choose not to actively go after something, you're still making a choice, right?
Oh, absolutely. Inaction is still an action. It's all about being aware of where you put your time and energy, whether actively or passively.
Which leads perfectly to stepping outside our comfort zones.
Yes, for real growth to happen. You compared life to a snowflake, always unique, constantly changing. Like, we need to embrace that fluidity and be open to new experiences, even if they're a bit uncomfortable at first.
It's where the magic happens. You find out who you really are and what you can do.
Right.
And you made a great point about perspective and understanding. You said looking at things from a new angle always leads to better understanding. But finding that new angle, that's the tricky part.
It is, isn't it?
It's like knowledge isn't just about gathering information. It's about seeking out different viewpoints and questioning your own assumptions.
Curiosity is key. It unlocks new doors of understanding. And speaking of keys, you've been experimenting with repetition in your daily life, haven't you? You started a new practice. Tell me more about how it's affecting you mentally.
Well, you said something that really stuck with me. Repetition is easy. The drive to repeat is not.
Ah, yes. What did you make of that?
What did I make of it? Well, I thought about intrinsic motivation, like we were talking about earlier. If you're not really into what you're doing, you lose steam quickly. But when something connects with you on a deeper level, that's where repetition becomes powerful.
Exactly. And you even compared it to your old journaling habit.
Oh yeah, how I found that same kind of satisfaction in expressing myself freely.
Mm.
It's about finding those things that resonate with us, that we do just for the pure joy of it. When we have that inner spark, being consistent becomes effortless.
You're tapping into a deeper well of motivation.
A strange intrinsic pull, you called it, even if there's no obvious reward.
I love that. We're so focused on external validation these days, but true fulfillment often comes from those things we do simply because they feel right, because they match our values and passions.
It's like real creativity comes from within, not from outside praise.
Exactly.
And that brings us to your thoughts on creativity versus precision, especially in your work and hobbies. You're more logical and precise during the day, but at night, that's when your creativity flows.
Interesting, isn't it?
You said your mindset shifts at night, you're more prone to procrastination.
It's like embracing a different side of myself.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how our energy and mental states change throughout the day and how that affects our approach to different tasks.
But you also said that nighttime procrastination can feel like self-sabotage sometimes,
That's a struggle for a lot of people, isn't it? We all have those inner critics that try to hold us back.
especially when we're tired or feeling vulnerable,
Exactly. It's about learning to recognize those patterns and finding ways to deal with them.
which we'll get into in a bit. But first, let's take a moment to think about everything we've talked about so far. Then we'll come back and explore your ideas about discipline, change, and how powerful learning can be.
Mm.
All right, so we've talked about details, intrinsic motivation, and those shifting perspectives. But now let's dive into something else you brought up, discipline. You talked about that tricky balance between pushing yourself too hard and not enough.
It really is a balancing act, like walking a tightrope,
Yeah.
right? Too much discipline and you burn out, not enough, and well, you don't get anywhere. You even compared it to healthy eating, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah. Like with food, if I restrict myself too much, I just end up craving everything I'm trying to avoid. And then it backfires.
Exactly. It shows how discipline isn't just willpower, it's about finding something sustainable, something you can stick with without feeling drained. And sometimes it's not even about wanting discipline, it's about having the strength to keep it up.
That's where a lot of people struggle. You start strong, then life happens, you hit a roadblock, and poof, motivation's gone.
It's like those studies on building habits, right? It's not
Oh.
just about setting a goal, it's about having systems and routines that help you stick with it even when willpower fades.
So you build up those mental muscles over time, training yourself to stay focused, even when it's tough. And I loved how you connected this to working out. Pushing yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, can lead to breakthroughs.
It's true. Growth rarely happens if you stay comfortable. It's about embracing those challenges, knowing they often lead to transformation. And it's interesting how change and growth keep popping up. You had a great way of putting it. If we want to be successful, we have to be different than we are now.
I was thinking about how every time I've achieved something meaningful, it's forced me to change my mindset, to learn, to step outside my comfort zone. Sometimes it's a big change, sometimes just a little shift in perspective.
It's about constantly evolving, adding new layers to how you see the world, like hatching. Breaking free from the shell, that's just like the transformations we go through as we learn and grow.
We shed old beliefs and habits to make room for something new. And speaking of new, you brought up a really interesting point about what it means to bring an idea or talent to life.
Right. Just having the idea isn't enough. It's about taking that raw material, effort, knowledge, whatever's valuable to you, and shaping it into something real.
And you said mental fortitude is key, like having the resilience to keep going even when things are tough.
Yeah, to bounce back from setbacks and stick to your vision. Let's face it, failure happens. It's part of the process. The trick is not letting it define you.
It's about believing in yourself, even when others don't, and having the courage to keep creating, keep exploring.
And your experience with these podcast questions is a perfect example. You didn't think you had much to say at first,
I really didn't.
but then you were typing away, exploring your thoughts, discovering new insights.
It reminds me that inspiration can come from anywhere. Sometimes the best way to see what you're capable of is to just start creating, to dive in and see what happens.
It's like shaking things up inside yourself, unearthing those hidden gems of creativity. And there's no pressure to have it all figured out beforehand. Just enjoy the journey, experiment, explore.
You said something that really resonated with me. If I ever peak and get tired of it, I'll just stop and move on to the next thing. Easy as pie.
You're embracing that impermanence of inspiration, just following your creative impulses wherever they lead.
It's natural for passions to change. The key is to stay curious, to be open to new experiences.
And you also talked about nourishing your creative spirit, about making your mind happy. You said, I'll do what I can to entertain what's left of my spirit because it's all I am and have. I may be scraping it at times. I still want to do what I can to make my mind happy. It's so important to honor that inner self, to find joy in the creative process.
And then you said, "It has given me more than I have given it so far. I will continue to feed my soul."
It speaks to how creativity and personal fulfillment are intertwined, don't you think? When we invest in our creativity, we're not just making something, we're feeding our souls.
You even admitted it might sound cheesy, but you don't care because it's mentally satisfying.
And it should count for something, right? We shouldn't be afraid to embrace the things that bring us joy, even if they don't fit the traditional idea of success.
That's a perfect transition to our next topic. So we've discussed discipline, change, motivation, and nurturing our creative spirit. But there's one more piece, the transformative power of learning.
And your final point about learning and growth ties everything together so well. If we want to be successful, you said, we have to be different than we are now. You're basically saying that learning and growth require us to leave our comfort zones and embrace new experiences.
It's exactly. To go after something new is to fundamentally change who we are. And I think that's the perfect place to start our next segment. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've talked about so much, from those little details that spark our curiosity to the challenges of discipline and keeping that creative spirit alive. But we ended on a really interesting note about success and change. You said if we want to be successful, we have to be different than we are now.
Yeah.
So like, to grow, we need to get out of our comfort zones, try new things, right?
It's fascinating. You're linking success to transformation. It's not just about hitting a target. It's about becoming someone new along the way, someone who can hit that target. And that connects to this idea of a growth mindset. You know how psychologists say our abilities aren't fixed. They can grow if we put in the effort and keep learning.
Like you're always expanding your potential, always becoming more than you were before.
Yeah.
And you mentioned how new information, it doesn't always totally change your mind, but it adds to your understanding.
Like building a house, right? You start with the foundation, then walls, then a roof, and eventually all those details that make it a home. Every new bit of info, every experience, it just adds to the structure of what you understand.
It's not about forgetting what you knew. It's more like enriching it,
Yeah.
adding complexity like brushstrokes on a painting, making it richer.
I love that. Learning never really stops. It's not just about new facts, it's about refining how we see the world, where we fit into it.
You've given us a lot to think about today. Details, motivation, discipline, and creativity, it's all so valuable. That idea of scraping for that last bit of creative spirit, how important that drive is to you, that really struck me.
It's been great diving into all this with you. And to everyone listening, remember, just like when a baby bird hatches, breaks free to show what it can really do, your own journey of learning and self-reflection will bring amazing things to light. Keep looking closely, keep asking questions, and see what you create.
Such a powerful image to end on. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive, everyone, and we'll see you next time.